So today we're in the clouds. Over the last few weeks we've heard what has changed with Jesus, how he was the once only sacrifice, replacing the temporary acting animal sacrifices that are set out in the law of Moses, which we find in the Pentateuch. And then we heard about, rather than doing what is set out in the law, just following the rules, Jesus calls us to be Christ-like. It's not about doing the rules and then getting on with our lives, but about being Christian in all that we are. If we were a stick of rock, the Christian in us would not just be the shiny, bright-coloured coating on the outside, but would permeate right through to the middle and along the whole length of the stick, being Christian to the core. And then last week we heard about how we need to keep faith, even when it gets tough. We're told not to give up, but to hold true to the message and to encourage each others towards love and good deeds. And then today we find out more about how we might encourage each other by thinking about clouds. I wonder, how do you feel about clouds? I suspect for many of us, our feelings about them have recently altered, and the clouds that brought rain this week were welcomed, even if they did mean a quick change of plans and wardrobe. In this short passage from Hebrews, the author, whoever he was, we're pretty sure he was a he because of a verb ending in chapter 11, verse 32, but that's probably digging a little too deeply into ancient Greek for now. In this passage, the author tells his audience that they are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. What might he mean? What does this say to us today? I don't know whether you have ever been surrounded by cloud. Not just above you, but completely surrounding you. I remember some years ago walking with my wife, Andrea, and my son, Jonathan, and we were in Snowdon. And as we were descending from the summit, we could see clouds racing up the mountain towards us. It was an amazing sight, but also worrying, as I knew that if we didn't find the right path before the clouds reached us, we might miss the turning off the Llanberis path and end up in Llanberis, which unfortunately was the opposite side of the mountain to our car. On this occasion, we were both amazed and concerned about imminently being surrounded by cloud, but we did find the right path before the cloud reached us, and so we did get down to our car. On another occasion, I remember driving in very, very thick fog. I did what I remembered being told to do in such circumstances: dipped the headlights, slowed down, opened windows so I could hear other traffic. The fog was so thick that the visibility was very restricted. And whilst I was concerned about other traffic, I was also strangely calm and at peace, and oddly felt safe and protected, as though the fog was cushioning me, protecting me. I wonder why this was. I wonder why I felt like this, as it seemed so counterintuitive to feel safe when my vision was so severely restricted. I wonder, why does the author of Hebrews use the image of a cloud of witnesses? Now, I can think of two possible reasons. There are undoubtedly more, but today I want us to think about these two. God is in the cloud. Think about the times in the Bible when God has important conversations with humans. What comes to mind? Do you think perhaps about God talking to Moses on the mountain when he gave him the 10 Commandments? Or when God spoke to Job at the end of the book of Job? Or, of course, today's gospel reading where God tells the disciples to listen to what Jesus tells them. Now, of course, God isn't just in the cloud. God is everywhere. But significant conversations with God, with humans and God, have taken place in clouds. Some commentators, and indeed some scripture, tells us that this is because the face of God is so wonderful that a human couldn't handle seeing it. But I wonder whether it's for an additional reason. When we're surrounded by cloud, our ability to see with our eyes is hampered. And like me driving with my car windows open in the fog, it means we need to rely on other senses. We need to tune in a different way. We can't rely on what we can see. We need to be open to our other senses. Is God speaking to us all the time, but we don't hear because we're being distracted by what we see going on around us? Do we need to switch off one of our senses to better hear what God is saying? Is this cloud of witnesses there to help us to better focus on God? Well, the author of Hebrews certainly seems to think it is, as he tells us to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and instead fix our eyes in Jesus, not on, but in Jesus, the perfecter of our faith. We need to refocus our focus. But sometimes this refocusing can be difficult, confusing, and take some time. Oddly, in the final verse of the Gospel, Jesus tells Peter, John, and James that they shouldn't tell anyone what they have seen until after he's dead. He doesn't tell them why they should keep it a secret, though perhaps he knows they don't yet understand. After all, Peter did seem more interested in building shelters for the 3 people he'd seen. Jesus knew that it would take time for it to make sense to them. Now, we do know that it did make sense to Peter in due course, and he did come to understand its significance, as we read in the second letter of Peter, chapter 1, verses 16 to 18, if you want to look it up, where he talks about his experience on the mountain at the time of the Transfiguration, when he says he heard God's voice coming from heaven to endorse Jesus' ministry. And this brings me to the second reason I think the author of Hebrews uses the image of a cloud. A cloud is made up of millions of tiny droplets of moisture. Each is almost impossible to see on its own, and yet when they come together, their impact is clear to see. On our own, we might feel that our faith is too weak, too unformed, too new. We might worry that we can easily be distracted. We might worry that it's too shaky to withstand challenge from those we meet who do not share the same faith. We might feel that as a solitary droplet of moisture, we can't be a messenger of the good news, and so our faith appears to evaporate when we come away from church. But that is where the cloud of witnesses comes in. By coming together as lots of individual droplets, we can support each other, help each other, encourage each other. I wonder, why do you come to church? Is it to be refreshed? To help refresh your faith? Is it for renewal? Is it to renew your faith? Is it to be encouraged? Is it to encourage you in your faith? Now, hopefully you're able to find all 3 of these here, but to paraphrase J.F. Kennedy's presidential inauguration speech, it's not just what your church can do for you, but what you can do for each other. How can we all help refresh, renew, and encourage each other in our faith? What can we do spiritually and practically to help each other so that we don't feel like insignificant droplets of moisture that evaporate when faced with an opportunity to share our faith, but that we become a cloud of witnesses? In his sermon at the recent Lambeth Conference, the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, called on the bishops to remember that they and we are not here to build an earthly empire of an institution called the church. And by talking about McDonald's purpose being to make burgers, Cadbury's to make chocolate, Heineken to make beer, he reminded them that the purpose of the Church of England is to make disciples. In business terms, our output should be disciples, people who go out as messengers of the good news. After all, that's what Jesus told us to do in the Great Commission at the end of Matthew's Gospel. Go and make disciples of all nations. But this can be very difficult. It can be very scary. How can we do it? By supporting each other, by refreshing, renewing, and encouraging the faith in each other. To start, a couple of practical suggestions that you might find helpful that I heard in a sermon recently whilst I was on holiday in Winchester. Firstly, read the Bible. Study it, get to know it, get to really know it. There are various ways you can do this, and I'll happily talk to anyone afterwards if you would like some help with how to do this. But really do get comfortable with the Bible. Don't see it as something to be scared of. See it as something to embrace and get to know. And secondly, when you talk to others, share your own story. Don't worry about trying to remember what the Desert Fathers or Thomas Aquinas or some other theologian said. Tell people what your faith means to you personally. How do you relate to God? How does your faith help you? Personal stories are far more interesting and more powerful than reciting something learned by rote. And remember, we're called to be witnesses, not experts. You don't have to know it all. And indeed, if you don't know something or understand something, don't worry about it. Just say so. But talk about the things you do know and the things you do understand. And here's the odd thing. The more you talk about your faith, the more you yourself will come to understand what it means to you. I wonder, are you like me in wanting our church to be a cloud of witnesses?
So hopefully most of you get the update and have an opportunity to read it. That's where the news about what's happening in and around the parish is on. So if you don't, if you're new here and would like to receive it, there's some sort of pockets, wooden pockets at the side of the glass doors there with a card. If you fill that in and make sure that it comes to one of the clergy or to somebody who's by the door, then we'll make sure you get that. I'm saying that because particularly this week I've put onto there the fact that on Sunday the 4th, so 2 Sundays' time, is going to be Sally Prendergast's last Sunday with us. Sally's been curate here since July 2019, which has been a bit of an unusual time, to say the very least. But the purpose of somebody coming to be a curate is to continue their training. Sally did 3 years of training at Cuddesdon and then has been training on the job, as it were. And that time's come to an end. She's going to return back to Kimble, the village that she lives in and where she worshipped before she came to us, to be an associate there, to work with Janet Wales, who's the minister for Ellsborough, Kimbles and Stoke Mandeville. And so Sonny finishes with us on the 4th of September. She'll be having a bit of a break and then be taking up that role then. So what I would encourage you to do is to come on the 4th. Sonny will preside at the 9 o'clock service. We'll have coffee and pastries and things afterwards. And we're going to encourage the 10:45 congregation to come a bit sooner, so that we can all say thank you to Sally for all that she's done here and to wish her well. So please try to come on the 4th if you can, but also try to come this afternoon. Sally is giving a talk between 2 o'clock and 4. Firstly, about the time that she spent last summer with people who are of Islam. They lived sort of in community at Cuddesdon and shared an awful lot together. So she's going to talk about that. And then she's going to talk about the time that she spent with a few others from our diocese in the church in Sweden. Oxford Diocese are linked with a diocese in Sweden. Sally travelled there and she's going to talk about that as well. So please do come this afternoon if you're able to. The other things to share with you are about the walk that's happening on September the 10th. Some of you remember in June, Ian did the 3 peaks. Those were Ben Nevis, Scarfell, thank you, and Snowdon. The 3 peaks for our Chiltern walk are Pulpit Hill, Coombe Hill and Wendover Woods. So not so far to travel, not to be done within a 24-hour period, but still an opportunity to people to come together, to walk together and then to have a barbecue at the end of it. So details again of that are on the update. If you would like simply to come to the barbecue, or you know that you're going to walk and be at the barbecue, there's a sheet at the back that Michael has put up just so we have a vague idea of numbers for that. So Michael and Carol are here in our music group, and if you want to know more about the walk, then be talking to them. More details will also come in the update. I think that's just about all of it. But to remind you that on a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock we have a very simple said communion service, if you want to come along to that. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon our prayer group meet as well. And then finally, I'm going to embarrass a couple. So Verity and Nigel, I'm very sorry, but just want to say congratulations to you. Verity and Nigel have been coming to us over the last year or so. They went off to Florida and got married at the beginning of the month. And then next week, Nadine is going to do a blessing service for them. So huge congratulations to you. Lovely for you. So that's all. There will be coffee and tea after the service. It'll be outside because we're still dry and quite warm as well. So do please stay for that, a chance to chat to each other. Would you like?